Greetings. This lecture is on recruiting, selecting, and placing employees within jobs in the organization. We've talked about a whole lot of different functions in HR, specifically around diversity management and things like that. Now we're getting into some more substantive areas, things that you will have a direct impact on. Managers are much more involved in recruiting. They're very much involved in selecting who is going to be the next employee in their department. And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about how we place them and what that process will look like from the HR perspective. So you're aware of kind of what goes on behind the curtain, in the HR area. The next slide deals with our staffing strategy, and staffing strategy is broken down into two categories. One is the strategy we have about the level of employees that we are going to be hiring, and the other one is about the quality of the employees, or more the characteristics, if you will, of the employees. And so we'll start talking about staffing levels. We have a number of different things to consider. The first is, do we want to acquire our talent, people that already have a particular skill, and we go out and we hire for that particular skill, or do we develop them in-house? So we hire them perhaps for attitude, or hire them for competencies. And then what we do is we put them through the training in-house. If we have very company-specific skills, it makes sense to hire people who we think will be good, effective workers. They have good competencies. They are willing to learn and to grow. They have a learning orientation, and so we might develop them instead. So it really kind of depends on what our company needs, and we can develop a strategy based on that. The next strategy is whether or not the organization does the hiring itself or it outsources that function. A lot of employment agencies or recruiting agencies will help you with the hiring function, or you can go through and do your advertising and do the recruiting and hiring all on your own. So organizations can choose either direction. The nice thing about the outsourced option is that you can get a company to do all that pre-screening for you. You pay a nominal fee to have, to hire ultimately a candidate that comes to your organization, but it's really important that we think about what we can do in terms of the time that we have. If we're a small business, we may not have time to do the hiring ourselves, or if we're a small business, we may decide we don't want to pay the extra fees to have somebody else do recruiting work for us, and we might outsource a different function instead. So our goal is to figure out what works best for us in terms of our budget and in terms of the amount of control that we want to have over the hiring process. The next decision we have to make is external versus internal hiring. External hiring is where we bring somebody from the outside, bring them in, and we bring them in as to be a part of our organization. Internal hiring is where we promote somebody from within, or we move someone from within to a different department or a different division. We should have a balance, I think, of external and internal hiring. I think there are times when external hiring makes perfect sense, when we want to bring in new ideas, when we need to shake things up. And then there are times when internal hiring makes the most sense, where we want to reward people for good performance and good behaviors. So we might do lateral transfers or do promotions and whatever works. And I think any company that does one extreme or the other is going to run into problems. So I think you need to develop your strategy on a case-by-case basis when it comes to internal versus external hiring. Not all circumstances and jobs can do internal hiring, particularly entry-level can only do external, but there may be other departments or divisions where if we don't have an internal candidate, the only option is external, of course. The next is the core versus flexible workforce, and the idea is, do we want to have a hire for our core, where we want to make sure that we've got a good solid organization that is always dependable, always there, or do we want to have a more flexible workforce? And where in that flexible workforce we have temporary workers, or we have part-time workers, or we have consultants that come in and do work only as we need to, and then we send them home when we don't need them. So holiday workers, right? People who work in retail during the holidays, they're holiday staff, they're special staff. They don't really expect to be working there full time, but they know that they can come in and do work while the demand is high for sales representatives, and then they send them on home afterwards. So we can make that choice again about, do we want a solid core of workers that we know will be there every day, or are we more interested in having, just a small group of people with a flexible workforce sort of surrounding us? Next is the question of, do we hire people as we need them, or do we hire people to retain them? And the situation here is, do we want to make sure people stay for the long haul, or are we less concerned about that? We allow for turnover, in that consequence. So when we have a retention strategy, we hire with the expectation that this person's going to come and they're going to stay and they're going to work for us for a long period of time. When we are working on a hiring strategy, we recognize that turnover is going to happen. And some industries, this is fairly common, right? Restaurant industry, it's very common to have high turnover. Retail industries, clothing and things like that, expect high turnover. Customer service reps, on the telephone, high turnover. So we're not going to worry about the retention strategy that we have. We're going to worry about making sure we hire a good person, knowing that there's another good person behind them. If this doesn't work out, we have another person that will come in and replace them. We cannot always worry about retention for some types of positions, right? McDonald's doesn't worry about retention of the fry cook or the cashier. They may worry about retention at their managerial level, but they don't necessarily worry about that at the fry cook or the grill person who's doing all the cooking, or the cashiers. So each company has to think about that strategy based on what's going on. Are they a differentiation strategy company? Are they a cost leadership company? And again, all this that decision really sort of overarches all of these staffing strategy decisions. We need to make sure when we make a staffing strategy decision, it's in alignment with, are we a differentiation strategy company, or are we a cost leadership kind of company? Your next item is national versus global. And again, Monsanto, AB, these are all companies that are much more global, and they can recruit globally to find the best workers. But your local mom and pop, they're not looking to hire, a sales clerk that comes from Russia or comes from, Japan. They're looking for somebody who lives in the local area to come and do the job that they need them to. So again, while this may seem like a no-brainer, for larger, more multinational or global companies, we do need to consider whether or not the kind of hiring we're going to do is open up and look all over for people to come and work for us. And we think sort of anybody, should have the opportunity to come work for us, particularly if it's a company with a global perspective or a multinational perspective. Alternatively, even a large company that is global may decide that they only want to hire nationals. They only want to hire people who are internal to the U.S. So it really depends on the company's global strategy and how much they want to internationalize their workforce. In terms of attracting or relocating, an attraction strategy means I'm going to go wherever I can to attract people to come work for me, right? So it's rare that an organization would consider relocating in order to meet the demand. And of course, it's always possible, right? A company can decide they don't want to be unionized anymore. So they'll leave their unionized area and they'll go to a non-unionized area and relocate to make sure that they can have a non-unionized workforce. We can talk about whether or not that's appropriate. Well, it's legal. It's not very nice, but it's certainly very legal if you decide that you don't want to deal with the union anymore. And you can go to a right-to-work state where we don't have to worry about unionization anymore. So those are the kinds of circumstances where if a company is really struggling, they might decide to just relocate to go where there might be more staff that are available to be hired. Alternatively, you could do the attraction strategy, which is I'm going to search anywhere I can to find people to attract them to come to me. Trek Bicycles did this a number of years ago, where they realized that they didn't have enough people in their local area to do the work, right? They didn't have enough skilled labor because unemployment was so low. Everybody pretty much who wanted a job had a job. So they had to look elsewhere to see where they could find and attract somebody to them. Now, Trip Bicycles could have picked up and moved to another location where there were more skilled labor, or what they tried to do is think more globally, if you will, and I wouldn't say global, but more national. They looked all over the U.S. and tried to find where there were companies that had higher unemployment rates, and they went and they tried to recruit engineers to relocate themselves. So they were using an attraction strategy to get the engineer to come to them versus them going to the engineers, if that makes sense. So attraction versus relocation, it usually involves larger economic issues, or it involves larger sort of resource-based issues. We don't always make the decision to relocate our company unless we have a really profound reason to do so. So it's always important to remember that. The next is overstaffing, understaffing. We may be in a circumstance where there is a lot of turnover in my area, and so it's better for me to overstaff, to have more people than I need, so that when there is layoffs, or when there are people who choose to quit for whatever reason, there's lots of turnover, I am prepared. I can be sure that I've got enough staff on hand to be able to do the job. And that's usually where it's not so easy to find somebody off the street. So I might overstaff slightly to make sure, when there may be issues of turnover, I've got enough people to manage it. We also may choose to understaff. And that may be because we are a cost leadership company and we are trying to really tighten our budget. We're having some financial issues. So we might try to understaff to see if we can stretch our employees to do just a little bit more than they normally would, which is okay on a temporary basis, but it's not a good long-term strategy, to be perfectly honest, because you'll burn people out fairly quickly. So overstaffing versus understaffing, we've got to decide what's going to be the best for us in terms of managing it. Lastly is the short-term versus long-term strategy. Are we looking for short-term fixes to our staffing, or are we looking for long-term issues? If we are looking only for short-term stuff, we may consider just using temporary workers or interns or consultants, independent contractors to come in and just do work as need be and then go on their merry way. But if we're looking for more of a long-term focus, then we are looking to hire people, to retain people, and to keep those people engaged and excited about the job. Engagement's a huge part of workforce strategy. We want people to be engaged and excited about what we're doing. So if we're not engaging them, this is problematic. So that's staffing levels. Again, where we're going to find these people, how many do we need, at what point in time do we need more or less, and this all goes hand in hand with our forecasting process, right? Then we have to think about the kinds of people that we want to hire, the staffing quality, if you will. So the first item under there is person-job or person-organization match. A person-job match is where, again, we want to hire the right person for the job. So they have to have the baseline skills. The other aspect that we could take is hiring the people for the company and for the company match, or even perhaps some combination of the two. It's not mutually exclusive, right? We certainly want somebody who has the skills to do the job, but maybe if we go to the hire, the acquire or develop talent idea with the staffing levels, maybe we are going to have a really strong internal training program where we train everybody on everything they need to know about our company when they walk in the door. We don't worry about what skills they bring to the table. So from a hiring perspective, I'm not worried about hiring for particular skills because I know I'm going to train them all. So then I can focus in terms of my staffing quality. I'm going to focus on person-organization match. I want to make sure that the people will fit in with the culture, that they will get along with others, that they have the right work ethic that we want. That's the direction that we would head into for that type of quality with that kind of staffing strategy. Another thing we can think about is specific or general KSAOs or KSAs, knowledge, skill, abilities, and other. Specific KSAs or specific knowledge, skills, and abilities where we know that we need to hire somebody who has a very, very particular skill, and it's really important that we have it. The other alternative is the general KSAOs, where we just want to make sure that we hire people who have good competencies. Because we know, like at McDonald's, right? I don't need to worry about them having a particular skill other than being able to read and write and kind of give back change. So I'm going to hire for, are they going to show up on time? Are they presentable? Are they neat and clean? Those are the more general KSAs that are important to me. And then I can train them on specific skills that they need once they enter the organization, and then we can develop them from there. The next item is acceptable or exceptional workforce. And again, going back to the McDonald's example, McDonald's doesn't need to hire valedictorians to come in and work for them, at the counter, right? They want somebody who can meet the minimum requirements. They can read, write, they're breathing, whatever it might be. We're only going to hire people without a lot of skill necessarily, because we're going to do the training that we need to do on the job. So as long as they're acceptable, we're okay. We also allow for the fact that there's going to be turnover, and that not every worker is going to want to work for that amount of money doing that kind of work, without some sort of, reason behind it. So, obviously our high-level, highly trained, highly educated workers are not looking to go work for an acceptable workforce quality organization. If we're Microsoft, however, we are looking for exceptional workers. We want good quality people. We want high quality people because, again, we want to be able to pay top dollar. Cost leadership companies tend to hire acceptable workforce, particularly at the entry level. They might hire more exceptional people higher up, but again, they're not going to be super high end necessarily. People that are like differentiation strategy companies, they are much more focused on the exceptional side of things. We want to make sure that we've got employees who truly we can pay top dollar to, because we're charging top dollar for our products. So a differentiation strategy company tends more towards the exceptional style of hiring, most levels in the company, and the cost leadership companies are more likely, particularly at the entry level, to hire more acceptable quality workers for their organization. Lastly, is the active versus passive diversity. Are we going to actively seek to acquire a more diverse workforce? Are we going to be doing this very consciously, or are we just we're going to hire the best people and let it sort of passively correct itself over time? And every company can decide how to do that, as long as they are not violating any employment laws or affirmative action, if that is the particular case. So overall, with staffing strategy, it really is guided by whether or not we are a differentiation strategy company or a cost leadership company, and each one of those things informs how we make ourselves in alignment with organization strategy. The other aspect too to consider is that these things all have interplay. Whether we're acquiring and developing talent, or whether we're doing internal or external hiring, or hiring or retaining people, that all has an influence also on staffing quality. So the strategy that we might take so that our staffing levels and our staffing quality are in alignment, they may overlap with each other. So we have to make sure we recognize how all of those different characteristics that we're looking for in the staffing levels and quality all work together, and that we're planning with that in mind.
All right, next slide, dealing with matching principle. The matching principle basically says that we are focusing on two things: matching the person to the organization and the person to the job. And I already implied that when we were talking about our staffing quality. Matching the person to the job, we're matching our job rewards and responsibilities with the applicant's motivations and knowledge, skills, and abilities. And what that basically means is I'm going to have certain expectations about the responsibilities that I need filled, and I have to match that with the skills that you have in order to make that hiring relationship work. But also from the employee's perspective, I need to provide rewards that the employee will find rewarding. And remember, rewards aren't just quantitative rewards or financial rewards. They can also be job design and responsibilities that we give our employees. In terms of the person-organization match, we are not only looking at, can we match the person to the job and the rewards and things like that, but what we're looking at is, does the person fit with our culture? Are they open to new job opportunities? Can they grow with us, not just now, but into the future? And are they willing and flexible and able to handle multiple types of job responsibilities? And so if we're really focused on a person-organization match, we're not only looking at today, the here and now, what I need, but we also have an eye towards the future and what we're going to need for the future. Moving to the next slide where we talk about the recruiting process. Recruiting is about attracting qualified applicants for a particular job position. And again, the goal here is qualified. We could attract a lot of people to a particular job. All we need to do is say we're paying a lot of money and we'll get every crazy person and their brother, sister, and cousin, coming up to apply for the job. Our goal here is to get a pool of workers that are qualified from which then we can select the best person for that job, and it may be the person with the highest skills and the highest person-organization match in that process. We could do external recruiting, which of course means that we reach out to temporary agencies and employment agencies and websites and our own company website to find all sorts of things. Or we could do internal recruiting, which is where we work off of our company database to find qualified workers inside the company who may be eligible for a raise or a promotion or a lateral move in the company. The manager's job in recruiting is pretty integral. That manager is responsible for going out and reaching out to possible applicants. They do this with the help of HR. HR's job here is to provide the manager with the resources. Perhaps it's to reach out to job fairs or co-op opportunities. The HR department gathers these resources and the effectiveness of those resources and presents them to the manager, and then they discuss, what is the best way to recruit these individuals. When you have college fairs and things like that, it is the responsibility of the manager and even incumbent employees to be involved in that recruiting process. And typically you do some initial interviews and initial question and answer sessions in order to make sure that you are sort of pre-screening people, in that recruitment process. The manager can really sell the company, as can incumbent employees. It's very hard for the HR department itself to sell people on a particular job simply because they don't know that job very well. They don't know what it's like to work in that position. They can sell the person on the company, but they may not be able to do it as an effective job on selling them on a particular position within that company. So it does require the boss, the manager, and the employees to be much more involved in the recruiting. As for where the budget hit is, the budget hit typically comes out of the HR department. HR covers recruiting costs, and then the hiring costs typically come from departmental budgets. In terms of the internal staffing issue, we have open recruiting, which is basically where we open a position for everybody in the company and that is made available for people. Or we have closed recruiting, which is where we target individuals that we think would be qualified, and we reach out to them and let them know that we're interested in hiring them and that they have the skills that we need. Think about some of the problems that may come with closed recruiting. If we are only limiting ourselves to people we reach out to, number one, we may have problems from a legal perspective. We may be illegally discriminating and leaving groups of individuals out. But second, we may not be tapping into resources that are actually available to us. We may be tapping into only those resources that we know about, and we may not be aware of other resources. And I know there are times when, of course, again, reaching out to people that we may not be aware of, if we don't reach out to people that go beyond the people that we know, we may be missing out on some possible applicants. So I think it's important for us to do what we call targeted recruiting, which is a combination of targeting certain individuals that we know have the skills, but also allowing us to also have simultaneously open recruiting and doing these things simultaneously so that we don't lose any potential applicants in the process. Other things that we need to think about with internal staffing and internal recruiting is mobility paths and succession planning, and making sure that we have a plan for our workers to move up in the hierarchy of the company. Now, the next 2 pages are pretty straightforward. The external sources, I think all of those are fairly common that you should be aware of. Walk-ins are unsolicited people who walk in the company and just apply on site. We can have employee referrals. We can advertise in newspapers, magazines, radio. We can do online with Monster. We can do online in-house and have our own website that has online recruiting sources. College and placement offices, executive search firms where we pay a premium dollar typically to hire high-end employees. Professional associations also do that kind of hiring. I know for academia we have our professional associations, and all of our hiring really goes through those professional organizations. State employment agencies, outplacement agencies, community agencies, there are county hiring companies that work very hard to keep employment high in particular regions. Job fairs and co-ops and also are things that you should be familiar with. For internal sources, there's a lot of different things we could do. We could nominate people. We could work off of skill inventories to know what skills people have. We could do job postings. We could have in-house temporary pools. We can have people bid for jobs, which tends to occur more in unionized environments. And of course, intranets, not just extranets, but intranets for the company, as well as any kind of succession plans that we have set up.